If the Trump administration decides to pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement, it will have global repercussions. The U.S., as Jessica mentioned, is the second biggest emitter of greenhouse gases, and without Washington's commitment, the world will likely miss already tough targets on curbing emissions. CGTN's Nathan King is in our newsroom. So, Nathan, what will be the international ramifications if the U.S. withdraws?
Well, in short, Elaine, if the U.S. doesn't lead, who will?
Vice Premier of the State Council of China.
April 2016. China's chief climate negotiator Zhang Gaoli and then US Secretary of State John Kerry essentially sealed the deal. The world's two biggest CO2 emitters signed the Paris Climate Agreement, ensuring it would come into force. It did in November 2016. But that same month, Donald Trump was elected President of the United States. He campaigned on bringing back coal jobs and rolling back regulations on emission. If he does decide to withdraw from Paris, China and the European Union are vowing to stick with the agreement.
If in the next few hours or days the U.S. president leaves the Paris Agreement, then it is Europe's duty to say it's not like that. It's not just about the future of people in Europe. It is above all about the future of people in other places.
Any increase in US emissions will mean the world will be far less likely to reach the goal of limiting the rise in global temperatures below 2 degrees Celsius. The US decision will affect everyone on the planet. At the G7 summit in Italy last week, European leaders expressed frustration at the emerging US position. Even if the US sticks to the deal, it's unlikely it'll stick to the Accord's ambitious targets. That could encourage other nations to balk at their targets too, and the whole deal could essentially unravel. Although President Trump's hardcore supporters will be behind a pullout, polls show the majority of US voters favor the agreement, as are many global companies enthusiastically embracing the technology of tomorrow. Another downside for the US, a pullout could erode Washington's global influence.
Europe is ready for the leadership, and we will definitely provide it.
Now remember, this isn't the first agreement globally, if he does pull out, that the Trump administration will withdraw from. There was a regional Trans-Pacific partnership. That was a trade agreement, though, and only really affects those countries involved and the region. If the US pulls out of Paris, of course, it could affect every human on the planet.
And Nathan, you touched on it in your story, but how badly could this affect global leadership?
Well, in terms of the US, let's just count it up. Obviously, NATO. The question over Article 5, the mutual defence. Now we have climate change. I mentioned TPP. There's talk of the US realigning its alliances globally, moving towards Russia. All this, of course, is creating big question mark over US leadership in certain areas. You know, a lot of people are, of course, are willing to put up with political differences. There are so many different political differences among world leaders, but what they do have come to expect from the US is stability and also telegraphing where you're going. Here we have a president that has come into power campaigning on throwing out the agreement, but then shall I, shan't I? This is creating a lot of questions, not just on climate change, but on other commitments the US has as well.
All right, Nathan King there in our Washington newsroom.